Josh Wade Show. My name's Josh Wade. Thanks for watching the show. I want to give a massive shout out to The Siege for helping us with the theme music. We love them. They've been supporting us all the way. Go and support the boys. They're fucking legends. Their music is great. We've got the Patreon group. Massive shout out to everyone that's helping us out on Patreon. You're helping us grow each and every week, and I appreciate the shit out of you. So we just did a meetup in Sydney not long ago. We're doing one in Melbourne soon. It's great. I love all the guys there. We do a weekly live stream over in there. So if you want to get a part of it, be amongst it. It's sort of like Antifa in itself. It's my private little Antifa. Yeah, nice. We're not anarchists. We're just mostly all just conspiracy theorists. Come and check it out. No, we're not mostly conspiracy theorists. I don't want to say that. We're just logical thinkers. That's probably a better way of putting it. I'm going to be in Melbourne and Sydney at the comedy festivals there. Come see my show. We're also doing a live podcast in Brisbane really, really soon. If you live in Brisbane and you want to see my TED talk on crack, the one that they wouldn't allow, come and see it. Bring your questions along. We're going to, last time we had Jimmy Jackson and Justin Ryan fucking melt their brains. We're going to melt your brain this time. And that's about it. Is that all good, Connor? That's it. Yeah. That's it. That's good. All right. Plugged my soul away. Now it's time to fucking dig into yours, mate. Shayne Hunter.
Good day.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, you said the best way to describe yourself is one of the core organisers or a former core organiser of...
Antifa, Sydney and Brisbane.
Yeah, okay. So you helped bring this motherfucker to this country, yeah?
I did.
Okay. Well, fuck, that's an interesting story.
I was one of the original cancer cells.
Okay. So, but you're ex now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go all the way back because this is interesting because as I've met you, where you've mentioned that it's a cult. You sort of threw that out there that you're in a cult, and and I'm interested in the way that you've worded some of the things that you've said since being here. I'm fucking analysing you before I even know you.
Yeah, fair enough, man.
But I'm fascinated by this. But I want to know, because you seem like a reasonable, logical thinking person, how you fell into something that you say is a cult. Let me go back. Where were you born?
I was born in Adelaide, so South Australia, man. Yeah.
Oh, well, that explains the whole thing. All right, well, thanks for watching. No. Okay. Yeah, so you were born in Adelaide. How old are you, mate?
I'm 29, man.
29. Okay, and you're a stand-up comedian as well.
I am, man. Yep.
Okay. All right, so you've grown up in Adelaide.
I grew up in Brisbane. I was born in Adelaide.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So what were you interested in growing up?
Growing up, I was interested in video games, the normal stuff. I got into like chess really big as a teenager, but sort of about 15 or whatever, I sort of got more and more into the sort of conspiracy theory type stuff out there on the internet. And then I slowly, maybe about 18, I got into kind of right-wing libertarianism. Mm-hmm. So Ron Paul and that kind of stuff. Yep. That was sort of the main abstraction to explain the world for me at the time. Mm-hmm. And then about 24, I sort of got into anarchism, which is like, so it sounded like sort of a left-wing version of the right-wing libertarianism I was into.
Right. I think for anyone that doesn't know yet, because I'm still, I struggle with wrapping my head around what Antifa is and all that. Can you explain in the way that they would what they are and what they're trying to achieve for anyone that doesn't know?
Well, what they are is they're radical left-wingers. So they're a mixture of communists or anarchists. So they believe that society is predicated on oppression and that we live in a what they would call a capitalist, patriarchal, white supremacist colonial society. And they believe that it needs to be overthrown or dismantled in order for a just society to happen.
So it's fighting fascism with fascism, kind of.
Well, that's sort of what they believe, right? That's the ideology of the people who make up Antifa.
Yeah.
And Antifa is sort of like a platform where communists and anarchists will go together to protest against the radical right-wingers, or people they decide are radical right-wingers who they think are contributing to these cultural forces at play that are oppressive.
So, it's very easy to throw at alt-right and radical right-wingers and stuff like that. But to me, at times, it sometimes just feels like a thing to throw out at someone that just disagrees with you. It's sort of like a throwaway. Yep. When did you get into this? How long ago was this?
This was about 2013.
So this is before Trump and all that sort of craziness, which really threw it into the...
Yeah, before it was sort of in the limelight, so to speak.
Yeah, so you were involved in possibly what was at the time much smaller.
Yeah.
Not mainstream at all. You're a part of a very, I suppose, I wouldn't say underground, but somewhat underground political movement that obviously didn't have the legs that it does now.
Yeah.
So you're on the internet, you're interested in conspiracies and politics, and just you're obviously young and you're wondering how the world works and why it's structured the way that it is.
Yep.
Now, how does someone go from being what I personally would consider myself probably a bit more on that Ron Paul side of, libertarianism. I can't even get the fucking word out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
How does someone go from that to the total other side of the
I can
pendulum
tell you
swing?
how it happened to me. So I was very critical of the US foreign policy, and obviously Australia follows America for various reasons. And they were talking about invading Syria, Western intervention, so the US, Britain, and presumably Australia to invade Syria to overthrow Assad. And I was very concerned about that, maybe hysterically concerned about it, irrationally so perhaps. And I was worried that if the West invaded, it could spark a conflict with Russia because they've got Russian bases there. And I was worried that that could escalate into a nuclear war. I started going to these rallies, these protests against the possibility of a Western intervention. And I was sort of protesting around Martin Place, which is where a lot of the protests happen in Sydney. And I got exposed to radical left-wingers then. That was the first time I got to meet these people. And for me at the time, a lot of my peers, say in the comedy scene, whenever I'd rant about politics or whatever, they go, here he goes, off on his... So I felt kind of alienated. So when I found sort of people around my age that were interested in talking about these things, it kind of resonated, and it gave me a sense of belonging. And then through having conversations with them, I could see their point of view, and I guess... maybe I wasn't aware of sort of the ways that you can kind of subconsciously, slowly absorb other people's beliefs if you're hanging out in a social situation. And a slow transformation over about 6 months sort of made me kind of let go of my previous ways of thinking about the world and go headlong into the sort of anarchist thinking.
Right. Okay. I want to break that down a little bit because what you said there was very interesting. You skipped over a really interesting point, which was you went straight into, you just went to a protest, you went to a rally or something like that. Now, for a lot of people, obviously everyone has a different way of communicating and trying to get across their opinions. But what I want to know is what made you take that first step? What was so terrifying? Obviously, the threat of nuclear war is terrifying, but what took that out of the realm of just a possibility that could happen into, I need to get in my car or get on a train and I need to go to a rally and I need to fight, what you were trying to fight. So basically why was I motivated enough to do that? Yeah.
I think there's a multitude of motivations, so I'll try and break them down. One is I kind of was thinking about the possibility of nuclear war, and then I thought that, perhaps if I didn't go out to try to relate to it, even though on hindsight I think it was very misguided way of going about this stuff. If I wasn't prepared to do it, why would I expect anyone else to do it? Right. So that was sort of my thinking of like, well, if I expect this to be enough of a movement to maybe stop this, I would have to go out myself at least in the hope of maybe getting other people to go out. But I think that there maybe was a deeper level of motivation underneath that. And two motivations I think are very strong. One was the desire to have meaning in life. What could be more meaningful than stopping a nuclear war? I mean, maybe there's a narcissistic element in that, that I'm so self-important that I could make the difference.
Yeah.
But
I'm the same.
But then there was maybe another motivation that maybe I wasn't quite aware of at the time, because at the time there were a few promoters in comedy saying, okay, it's time to step up and start doing solo shows. And on the one hand, that requires more responsibility because there's more weight, more pressures to do that. And then I also kind of felt, maybe there's some truth in it that I felt like, oh, that seems a bit narcissistic and a bit selfish or whatever.
To do your own show?
Yeah.
Why?
Why? Because it was sort of this idea that it would just be benefiting my life or whatever. Now I think that you can both simultaneously do what's good for you, which can affect others because you're in a position of greater, I guess, social position, wealth and stuff, and you're better able to look after people around you, and looking after yourself means you're better able to look after people around you. I mean, I'm sort of detracting, but one of the things I've learnt through this experience is that, you know, my ability to do positive things are more localized in my direct spheres of influence.
Okay. So you've gone to this first rally. You've met a bunch. It's interesting you say that, because it seems like at that time as well, you say in 2013.
Yes.
A lot has changed. And I think not even as, you know, guys in the comedy scene as such, and you'd be far more into the scene than what I am. I live in my own little world. But it very much seems like back then there's a massive difference between what it was then and what it is now. It's almost expected, I would guess, if you're performing in certain areas, that you have to have some sort of political motivation. There has to be a Trump is an idiot joke. And
so you're talking about like
just the comedy scene, like how politics is now so heavily involved in it. You have to somehow incorporate this. There's oppression.
There's
and
a message, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost like you're saying back then there was none of that. So you've gone out to these people, whereas if you waited 3 or 4 years, you would have been fine.
Totally. I mean, I feel like it's sort of surreal for me, because I've kind of gone through all this underworld of ideological possession, right? And then I've come out, and now all the comedians are kind of playing the same fake game of like, look at my moral persona, where I get to criticize and. I obviously can kind of see through it, and I think it's very fake. And I also kind of giggle to myself, because a lot of these people, they're changing their profile pictures as like, I was getting arrested for this same shit that you purport to believe in.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think with the comedy scene and this desire, I feel like it's an easy way to get a sort of a sense of morality.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's an easy way to just sort of declare, oh, look, I'm against racism and sexism. Oh, but you're saying that within the confines of your artistic echo chamber, where everyone already agrees with your opinion.
Yes.
And I think morality is situation dependent. Like, you could put that same hipster film student who's against racism proudly, you put him in prison, chances of him joining the Aryan Brotherhood are going right up.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I feel like that there's... I feel like it's about posturing as moral.
Right. Okay. I guess it comes back to what you just said before, which is maybe as well that these people are still trying to find their sense of community. I know we're going into the comedy world, but it seems to me that everyone is quite, I wouldn't say damaged, but you know, comedy as a whole is looking for approval at mass. You go out every night. And whether you're doing a 5-minute set or a 1-hour show, you're going out there and you're using laughter as a thing of approval, and then you leave the stage and you wake up the next morning going, I fucking hope I have a good show tonight. They fucking laughed last night. Like, you're fine. You've got the approval, but it's this lack of confidence of some sort. But let's go back into the politics stuff and Antifa and that. So you've met these people. Let's talk about the process from that first rally to then going, I'm going to help organise and bring Antifa to Australia to a mainstream light. What the fuck happens?
Yeah, well, it was a slow process. So first of all, my concerns were about war. You know, I just thought, we just need to change the policy or whatever. And then hanging out with these anarchists, I slowly took on their ways of seeing the world. So they believe that, you know, protesting against war isn't good enough, because that's a symptom of all these systems of oppression, right? So in their mind, you know, we live in, you know, they sort of had what's called an intersectional feminist analysis of the world, that there's these hierarchical systems of privilege and domination. So it's sort of a kind of a Marxist worldview. So classical Marxism split the world into different groups that were competing for power. So you had the working class versus the bosses. And the only way they relate to each other is through oppression and oppressed, right? And I think it's a oversimplification, because I don't think every boss and worker relationship is purely parasitic. I think there can be a symbiotic relationship of individuals freely negotiating that the Marxist worldview doesn't see. But there is an element of truth to what they're pointing out. And when they point to that element of truth, that's how the ideology sort of gets sucked into your brain. You know, for example, you know, it is true that, you know, there's it's like the brain doesn't have a defense lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So like you've got the judge in your brain, and then you've got the persecutor, and then the persecutor is like all the evidence of, oh, look how Australia's racist. Look at the stolen generation. Look at the way that refugees are disproportionate.
Yeah.
But then there's no defense lawyer who comes into your brain and goes, well, actually, you know, for every time there's a viral video of a racist guy yelling at some brown person on a bus, how many thousands, you know, no one's sharing the viral video of the dude not being racist on the bus. So there's a massive confirmation bias. I mean, there's actually a case to say that Australia is one of the least racist places in the world, in the history of the world, because it's the most ethnically diverse population in the world, and we're not all stabbing each other in the street. So they lose nuance, and they take a little bit of truth and then they extrapolate it to become an extreme.
Yeah.
And then because you're hanging out in sort of an echo chamber, these ideas get reinforced in your head.
Yeah.
So the way our brain sort of works is like, have you ever tried to quit smoking or drinking or whatever?
Yeah.
And then you witness the internal process for the temptation to do that behavior.
Yes.
So it'll be like, oh, I should have a drink. It's Jono's birthday, but I drank too much last night. And there's sort of this balance between in your head, right? But having your peers who are going, oh, come on. It's like they're giving strength to that other voice in your head.
Yeah.
Right. So being in this ideological group associating with their views, it's sort of like that little voice of dissent is curled up in the corner while like you've got like 8 other voices in your head that are against that one. And slowly over time, that voice gets weaker and weaker until you have absolute certainty in your convictions.
Right. Yeah. So it is that echo chamber. It's Facebook's like that now.
Yes.
I mean, we only surround, but Facebook's got the artificial intelligence to talk to us in the way that we want to be talked to, which at the same time, I've heard arguments against that. Like people going, oh, Facebook's terrible. Like they're giving you fake news. They're giving you all this. They're playing to your own weaknesses. But at the same time, Facebook as a business and as a company, their whole job is not to, they don't give a fuck about that, really. I don't necessarily think. Of course, they have agendas at play. And if they get paid enough money, I'm sure they're happy to push some shit down people's throats. But their whole job for Facebook to remain a business and for them to make money is just to keep you on the fucking site and keep you happy. And if that means playing to your echo chamber, then so be it. And I guess in a real world sense, that's what you're saying these political groups is just keep playing to these extreme points of view that you want to agree to and are agreeable to, and it just keeps playing through. So when you talk about you're into conspiracies and geopolitical issues and stuff like that, how old were you and what was the first thing that made this all the domino fall?
So how I started to get into activism?
Yeah. What was the thing that just made you go, that's
like I needed
fucked?
when I started going to the rallies?
Yeah.
Oh, it was the Western intervention in Syria, because for my generation, I think there were two kind of events that shaped our worldview.
Yes, so which
and,
were?
The GFC, when the bankers got a bailout.
Yep.
You know, now that I think the issue is a lot more nuanced than I used to think, but it was very easy for me to go, oh, look, you see, the game's rigged.
Yep.
The game's unfair.
Yep.
Why would I want to play this game? Why would I want to just have a normal life when the game's wrong? So that was sort of a thing that affected my thinking. And then the other issue was the failure of the Second Iraq War. So, you know, I was thinking about how, you know, many hundreds of thousands of civilians died and the entire society got plunged into poverty. And and it was sort of trumped up on what was now believed to be a lie, weapons of mass destruction. And
it was a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and so that sort of for me made me feel that the powers to be were completely illegitimate. And I took them as evidence to dismiss the entire, I guess, merits of the Western civilization. And that I thought that the policies and the decision making were only based on the interests of the elite. And there's some merit in that thinking, but I don't think it's the whole story. And so in that sense, when I was worried about the Western intervention in Syria, I thought that there was quite a possibility that, it could lead to a nuclear war.
Do you still believe that there's a possibility of a nuclear war?
Absolutely. I think it could escalate as fifth generation hypersonic missiles get implemented or whatever. But I feel like the big lesson I've learned, I mean, I really haven't even talked about the cultish dynamics of the thing.
We will get into that.
But the big lesson for me is It's like the serenity prayer of the AA people. It's like, give me the strength to change what I can and the wisdom to not stress about what I can't. I'm paraphrasing, but you know, I feel like the energy should go into my locus of control.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Like there's heaps of moral acts that I could do to make the world a better place. You know, I'm not looking after myself completely. There's family relationships that need maintenance and repairing or whatever. And so I was kind of trying to do the moral work in reverse, but it's actually a lot easier to stand out there with a sign going, it's all wrong, when I'm not examining my own corruption.
Yes.
Because it's not just the elites or the system of capitalism or whatever that's pulling the strings. The things that's pulling the strings for the bad things to happen are the same things that pull the strings that make me do bad things.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting, this culture that you're talking about, and I feel like we will get into that cultish behavior, but it seems like this cultish behavior and this, I don't want to say sheep mentality, because there's a sheep mentality in absolutely fucking everything. I'm probably one of them for fucking anything. I'll fucking get around a pair of expensive fucking shoes because I'm a fuckwit. I'll buy into all that sort of shit, but I know that I'm buying into it. When you were getting into this, when do you feel like you were fully indulged in it, and how do you feel like and how long did it take for that, and when did you recognize that the things that were put in place were quite cult-like behaviors?
Okay, so it took about maybe 6 months. So like I actually changed in my dress style and my behavior. So before then, you know, I was sort of a normal 23-year-old looking dude, and I slowly kind of became wearing all black.
You've lost identity by this point.
My identity was basically, you know, the way I would say it is I was became the unconscious avatar of dead philosophers I never read properly or understood.
Yeah.
Right?
Heavy.
And yeah, I started wearing all black and stuff, and I became, you know, like maybe you were talking about earlier with comedians needing to perform to the audience or whatever. Similarly, you know, we adjust our behavior with anyone we interact with to a degree. But I think that those instincts that can create harmony can also become pathological to the point where I became sort of an actor for the mob. I would get validation for certain activity and maybe sort of, you know, subtle sanctions or disapproval for other activity until, you know, my neural pathways shifted to become an actor and a puppet of the mob.
Right.
And so that process took about 6 months, and it escalated once I started dating one of these people, and then, you know, never date an extreme feminist as a guy. That's, you know, it's like being a Jew trying to date a Nazi. You know, it's you can't do anything right. Anyway, so and then
Heavy.
basically, when did I start realizing it was a cult? Well, this is the interesting thing, is I would see all these cultish like behaviors. A good example to explain it to the audience here is, so there was the anarchist social center, there was the bookshop, and then there would be these kind of squats that people would live in. So they would go into empty buildings and they would live in there, and that's without paying rent or whatever. And so at the time that was very exciting, because it's like, oh wow, I'm actually implementing my belief systems. Oh wow, this is awesome. It's like, you know, like it feels exciting when you first illegally download a movie. Well, like this felt like illegally downloading a house. Like, oh yeah, fuck yeah. But you know, it was sort of a false thing, because a lot of these places had damage. Do you know what I mean? Or exposed to asbestos and were quite like health risks.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It'd be like squatting in Chernobyl and going like, this is cool. We got all this free space, man.
Yeah.
But it felt exhilarating at the time, because it was this, I was maybe young and naive, and it was like this new world or new mode of being, right? And anyway, so an example of the kind of crazy culture that would happen is maybe you and your audience is aware of how like people get denounced online for being a racist or a sexist if they disagree with any of the people on the hard left.
Yes.
Right? And then sometimes you might notice that some of these accusations are very extreme. So instead of race, they kind of redefine these mainstream values of being against racism. So instead of it being like against someone being, you know, not being fired or not hired on the basis of their skin color and not their merits, instead of that being racism, it's now white people with dreadlocks are now racist.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so an example of how this played out is there was a transgendered Aboriginal identifying blind woman.
Complex, yes.
Right? So at the top of the victim hierarchy, right? And they're at a party, at a social event.
But are they actually at the top of the victim hierarchy though?
No,
Why not?
because they're living in Australia.
Okay.
And and basically, you know, I mean, the only thing that's universal about the human condition is suffering.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's what Buddha said. Buddha didn't say the only thing's universal about is suffering unless you're a straight white man. Like anyway, so they're at the party. There's another guy who had been an activist for 10 years who was campaigning around gay marriage long before it was sort of cool. And look, I'm changing my profile picture.
Yeah.
And then someone had an epileptic fit in this party, and there was an argument between this guy who'd been campaigning for gay rights and this transgendered Aboriginal blind woman, right? And instead of it being two adults negotiating over what was a complex situation, it turned into accusations of racism, transphobia, and all this nonsense. Right,
because it's fitting a narrative of some sort.
Yeah, the only reason they could be disagreeing is because they're in a position of power and privilege. Right, I can explain the mechanics of that just after this example. But so basically, what happened is that person got them banned from that social center, right, that they used to frequent. They weren't allowed a right of reply.
Jeez, that sounds a bit fascist to me.
It does. They weren't allowed a right of reply to respond to the accusations. And the collective members who alleged role at the social center was to just pay rent and maintain the bookshop had like either 3 or 5 meetings over the guilt of this person who wasn't in the room at a situation they weren't involved in. Even up to the point where the lease was ending and they should have been looking for a new place or where to put the books or whatever. That wasn't the priority. The priority was to determine the guilt of this person. So that person was devastated because within their social sphere, I mean, they were accused of all these things that they clearly weren't. And it was quite disgusting. And my theory is that when I got out of this cult, I started reading a lot about psychology to try to put my experiences into context. And one thing I learned that was quite interesting is we don't actually always know why we have our feelings. So a classic experiment is they have someone walk across a rickety bridge. They have a woman standing in the middle. They have that same woman standing at a bridge closer to the ground that's stable. And because people experience anxiety from being up high on the rickety bridge, they ask these people to rate how attractive the woman is. The people on the rickety bridge say she's much more attractive than the people down on the ground because we associate anxiety with people we're attracted to. So when they remember the thing, they remember their feelings of anxiety and then they attributed those feelings to her. So I would suggest what happens with this ideological narrative, would you agree that there's momentary pleasure in dominating or denouncing other people?
Yeah, for anyone, I guess. Yeah, it's power.
Yeah, absolutely. So so if they have a chance to denounce and destroy someone's reputation, that's a lot of power. And by proxy, they elevate their social position by bringing them down. But if you have a strong ideological narrative and you've convinced yourself that the reason what you're doing is taking a strong stand against racism and sexism, that ideological narrative can go, oh, the reason I feel good is actually because that's what it feels to be a hero.
Yeah.
This must be the hero feeling.
So there's a confusion between being on a power trip and being a hero.
Yes, I would suggest that these people have really dark, malevolent motivations, but their ideological narratives that are so ingrained into them makes them see that their bullying kind of malevolent actions are actually virtuous.
Yeah, the blueprint is exactly the same. The motive is just maybe a little bit different.
Yeah,
as in the blueprint for their actions are the same as.
Well, I feel what happens is these people's characters, and this happened to me. I became a much worse person under this ideology, and I felt like I regressed mentally from being an adult more into a high school mentality.
Yeah.
And the reason I think this happens is so the main. Okay, every moral system, tradition for right or wrong, like Buddhism, Christianity, or Dreamtime stories, one of the core parts of the cultural motifs is the capacity for the individual to be malevolent, right? So like the Dreamtime stories would be about telling the truth or whatever. And obviously these religions could become pathological in and of themselves, right? But what happened with Marxism and I think that was a big replacement for religion. And I think feminism, well, modern feminism is a form of Marxism. Basically, it puts the moral burden outside of the individual into classes. So every time you're acting in the world, the central operating system of the ideology is about, if you want to make the world a better place, you have to fight other people.
No, I think that's bullshit. Someone did that to me the other day, and I got really fucking annoyed by it because I don't know.
What do you mean shamed?
No, just questioned on something that I was like they'd taken something so far out of context.
Yeah.
To fit their own social narrative back to this class thing. But the way that I was looking at it had nothing at all to do with any sort of class thing at all. But to them, it definitely did, because that's how the whole world thinks of it. And it's, I don't know, I can't explain it.
Interpretation trumps intention with these people.
Exactly.
I can explain why that is, but I'll just finish that other point, because I think the other point is
you triggered me.
No worries, man. They actually provoke a lot of resentment, and I think they're actually growing the radical right through that resentment they're causing. So basically, okay, so when your mode of being is to think about what other people are doing, your attention isn't reorientating your own character. There's no humility. You're not looking at like, what am I doing wrong? What are the parts of my life that's fucked? Do you know what I mean? So with these other belief systems like the Dreamtime stories or the Buddhism or whatever, the emphasis on the people who take that as their brain's operating system is to reorientate their own character.
Right.
So I feel like this ideology is kind of like drugs, in the sense that if you take a lot of drugs, you're feeling pleasure that's kind of unearned. And usually pain and pleasure is the way we will reorientate our character to better create a mode of being that is more successful in the future and ideally more mature. But with this ideology, that process is disrupted in the same way drugs are, but for a different reason. And the reason that my job isn't to look at how I'm a piece of shit, it's to point out that. And so I'm fighting racism or classism or whatever. So in terms of being this culture of interpretation trumps intention, through trying to understand my experiences, what happens is we don't look at reality and then form our beliefs. Our beliefs inform our sense of reality. So, for example, this is why more Christians will report seeing Jesus' face in burnt toast than you hear about atheists seeing Charles Darwin's face in burnt toast, because the Christians have the expectation.
Yeah.
So what they do is they Jesus toast their reality onto you.
Yeah.
So they have one causal explanation for everything. Everything's predicated on oppression. And then with intersectional feminism, which is neo-Marxism, the classical workers versus bosses are split into a racialized and gender version. So that's why it's like whites versus blacks and men versus women or whatever. There's not individuals freely associating. It's group identities and power struggles, which is fucking pathological.
Yeah.
And so they go, oh, the only reason Josh is, whatever the fuck he did, the only reason he's doing that is a reflection of his power position because of his group identity.
That's literally what it was. And it's just like, I just don't see the world that way whatsoever. So like, that's not what my operating system is, but they're viewing me through their own operating system.
Well, it's a form of, they're bigots, because you're not Josh, who has an individual history or that's infinitely complex, because the differences between individuals in these groups is greater than the differences between groups. Do you know what I mean? Like, you could easily get along with a black woman more than me, or for example, because you might have more in common with her. Do you know what I mean? Because you'll have more similarities.
I just never seen the world in a sectioned, classed way at all.
Yeah.
Ever. I don't know if that's just me, and that's just me coming from my own echo chamber, and I don't want that to sound like moralistic, like I just don't. I've never looked at anything. I understand that there's, things that exist in play where there is certain types of oppression and people have gone through different things. I'm not denying that racism doesn't exist, because that's what would get thrown out from that statement. But I personally have never looked at anyone, and I just don't understand where this weird, like, imaginary social hierarchy ladder.
Because they'll look at the outcome statistics of demographics, and then they'll assume that every outcome is based on oppression.
I'm not looking at fucking statistics. I'm looking at who the fuck you are as a person, and that's it. I don't give a fuck about anything else. Who you are as a person when I meet you, that's it.
Yeah, but
it doesn't work like that.
But no, because they're bigoted. This narrative has has possessed them where group identity trumps the individual. It's a kind of pathological political tribalism. And I don't think they have any right to say that they're actually against racism. I think the biggest way to undermine these people is to point out the ways in which they're racist, because their claims to legitimacy is to say, we're fighting racism, we're fighting sexism, we're against poverty. If you undermine that claim of legitimacy, you undermine their moral high horse. And I feel that the ideology is less likely to spread.
It's interesting because I have no idea really about Antifa. I understand the basics of it, but other than that, it's not something I've ever really looked into. By this point, once I realized what this was, I was starting to tap out of it all because I went down I wouldn't say a similar path to you, but I was divulging and I could notice myself pushing my own, beliefs on people that may have been somewhat radical to some extent about, there's families that control the world and all this sort of stuff, and you need to believe it. If you don't believe it, you're a fucking idiot. Now it's like I think there's merit in it, but I'm not pushing it down anyone's throat. That's just the way that maybe the world is, but maybe the world isn't that way either. Like I used to look at things like all politicians were corrupt and they're all a part of the same system, like you said before. But it's not. It's good cop, bad cop. And it's the same in fucking everything. That's just life.
Everything's a yin-yang symbol, and these people only see part of it.
Yes, it's black
They'll
and
go,
white.
see the black dot?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what about the other part? No, the black dot, mate.
Yeah, it's a chessboard. It's all just a chessboard. But then that's when we divulge into occultism and all that sort of shit. But fuck that. We won't get into that right now. It's interesting. Some of the points that you brought up before are very similar. I have looked a lot into Scientology, and I've also looked a lot into things like the Westboro Baptist Church and just these little. They're using similar techniques.
It's like a collective psychosis.
Yeah, and it's funny listening to people that escape that, and the way that they're talking about it is in a very similar way to you, where it's this group herd mentality where if you go against the grain, you're either excelled from it, and not just you excel, but we will rip your life apart. And also this group, like there seems to be in each of them, and I don't know about Antifa, but I'm sure you can confirm it or not. Was there like a dobbing culture where it was if you had done something that might have been against the grain or not towards it, was it morally the right thing for someone else to do, say your girlfriend that you dated at the time, for her to announce that you had done something that might get you into trouble, like a self-policing society?
Absolutely. It
Right.
was that
So
was
everyone's
off the
scared.
Hook. That was off the hook in that thing. It was
Right.
like it was like Mao's Cultural Revolution. It was like, just the madness that happened. Like someone, people would change their identity on a daily basis. So someone would go from being a man to a non-binary, these nonsense made up things. Because they believe that gender is only a social construct, right? There's no biological basis for it. So if it's only a social construct, then my made up social construct is just as real as society's social construct. So that's why you get all this like, I'm non-binary and I'm demi-gendered and all this
Where do you
garbage.
stand with that, just out of interest?
I think it's nonsense. I think it's absolute garbage.
So transgenderism?
I'll tell you my thoughts on that. I think that it's a shame that these radical leftists have taken that issue to be their catch cry issue because it helps validate their narratives around gender by pointing to that. And then they can push their agenda through claiming that they're defending the interests of trans people. Now, I've got trans friends and stuff, and it's a complicated issue. So on the one hand, I acknowledge that people have the full autonomy to do whatever they want with their own lives. And it's not up for me to decide what they do. And if my friends want me to call them girl or she or whatever, I'm happy to do that. But there's a flip side to it. The flip side is there are cases where people have transitioned and then regret it. They've even had surgery and then regret it. Now, because of my experiences, I know the dangers of validation. And I know the dangers of thinking one causal explanation. So some trans people who detransition say that, I felt that by transitioning, my suffering, my depression, my negative feelings would go away. And they decided that it was their gender that was the cause of their suffering, Well, it was a plethora of other issues that needed to be addressed in their life. So, but then they start hanging out with sort of other people who think like this, and they get kind of validated and indoctrinated that if anyone disagrees with you, it's because they're a bigot, or even question you that it's because they're bigot and they're transphobe and they don't respect you, which means that anyone who's like, are you sure you want to go through with this? Do you want to maybe go to a counselor for a bit first and then maybe we can talk it out? No, that's transphobia. So that's, and so the thing is that although I respect my friend's rights to do that, I don't want to necessarily validate to them to the point where, because what I see happens with this ideology is they become irrationally resentful of the people they think are in the oppressor classes. So the straight white men or whatever who they think have all the power, but they don't actually, they still replicate racism and sexism to the what they think are the oppressed groups. So what I mean is they become sycophantic.
Yes, yeah.
So like there's a thing I call Michael Jackson syndrome. So Michael Jackson was surrounded by sycophants who he paid for.
Yes.
So when he goes, do you think I should have a fucking kids playground in my backyard and have 8-year-olds over? Do you think anyone will say that's weird? Oh, go ahead, Michael. Great idea, mate. No, that's not fucking crazy. Right. So I think that there's a danger in being sycophantic. And the reason people they become sycophantic towards these people in a way that might disrupt their individual journey.
Right. So it's not coming from necessarily a place of, people trying to lead people down the wrong path, but it's just yes men. It's
like misguided. It's misguided. It's misguided empathy, and it's a desire to feel moral.
It comes from the right place, but it's not necessarily.
So when it comes to the radical left, right? So in Cole Young's ideas, there's kind of there's archetypes of male and female. So basically, the idea that with the masculine sort of archetype, you've got the wise king, and then you've got the tyrannical father. So the wise king is when structure makes sense. No kids, don't run outside or whatever. The tyrannical father is when it's like, too strict, too much discipline to the point it crushes the kid, right? Now, women have their own version of it. You got the loving mother who's like, okay, sweetie, yep, blah, blah, blah. You can have some ice cream or whatever. But then you get the pathological mother, so the Oedipal mother, where it's too nice. So the Oedipal mother is like, sweetheart, I love you so much. You don't need to eat your vegetables ever. You can do whatever you want, sweetie. Oh, are you okay? You need a hug? You need protection? So you get overprotection, over-nurturing to the point where that in itself can produce a damaging result. And I think people in society can better understand the shadow side of masculinity going crazy, but they don't understand the Oedipal mother complex of when you're too nice and you're too empathetic, and that can become pathological. Like it's what Aristotle said. He said any virtue taken to an extreme becomes a vice. So if you're, I don't want to step in the way of someone's autonomous decision to become trans to the point where I'm like, yeah, you look so beautiful or whatever. When it's like they've just transitioned. It's a dude with lipstick right now. They don't look beautiful, right? But you want them to feel good.
Would they say that that's you? Like, I'll just argue back to that because I know there's going to be people that will fucking get triggered as shit from what you just said. But would they argue back that that's society's idea of beautiful, and you're just saying that she's not beautiful because that's not what your standard of beauty is?
I would say.
How would you argue back to that?
I would say that we're biological animals. And that we're attracted to symmetry and certain features that subconsciously attracted to that for reasons that make us have healthy offspring. And then on top of that biological reality, there is a changing current of social norms where the beauty standards change, but I feel underneath that there's a fundamental hard rock place that doesn't change, right? So fashion and things like that are arbitrary, but there's an underneath thing that like a woman covered in warts and half her face is melted off and has burns is not going to be as beautiful as like a woman with great skin and a symmetrical face and feminine features.
Right. Okay. So you're saying at a base level, not makeup and a nice dress and that. You're saying at a base level, there's a difference between. I guess what you're saying.
The thing is, this is what
I'm just
happens.
thinking about a woman with warts everywhere and a melted face. So.
Well,
it's a very visual.
What happens, right, is the left is interested in the radical left. Okay, so one way of thinking about it, this comes from a psychologist called Jonathan Haidt, and then these ideas have been further popularized by Jordan Peterson. Right?
Okay, yeah.
So basically what tends to happen on the radical right is they're too interested in borders. That's why they're like, fucking build the wall, mate. You know, they want borders, they want structure, they want things orderly.
Yeah.
But then when at the opposite end of the spectrum, they want, no, let's be inclusive, let's get rid of borders, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is every value structure is inherently discriminative. Not everyone can be beautiful, right? Think about comedy, right? So every value structure is kind of shaped like a pyramid. That's why I'm doing this, right?
Yeah.
At the bottom, you've got like your open micers or your new people.
Yeah.
That's where you got the greatest number of comedians at the base of the pyramid. Then up here in the middle section, you got intermediate comedians or whatever. So I'm hanging around here somewhere, right? And then all the way up the top, you got your very small number. There's less up the top. So there you got maybe Bill Burr or whoever you like, right? So up the top, the super famous, super competent, successful ones, right? The same will happen with any value structure when it comes to looks and beauty, which means it's inherently exclusive up the top. And this is an unfortunate fact of reality.
Yeah.
And so because they want a pathological form of inclusion, they almost want to destroy the pyramid and they want to rip down the very idea of competence, and they're resentful at the very idea of merit. So you can't be successful, Joss Wade, because you're hardworking and you're intelligent or whatever, and you discipline yourself to do what you want to do. You're only successful because of the oppressive dynamics of society and your white male privilege, which makes me feel better about being at this bottom of this fucking pyramid.
Right. There's more people at the bottom of the fucking pyramid
and
as well.
I can become a super victim. So at the bottom of the pyramid, you got the really oppressed people down here, where I'm the transgendered Aboriginal black blind person or whatever, who I can sit there going, woe is me. And then I have a bunch of people with an Oedipal complex looking to validate me for being nothing, which damages me psychologically because I'm getting rewarded for bad behavior, which is like a home. Because I think of truth as like when you tell lies and stuff, like it's like borrowing. Like truth is like the bank of reality, and they're borrowing like lies from reality, which means eventually, it's going to be fun for a while. I could take out a credit card and fucking just party and do coke and be with hookers or whatever. But at the end of that, truth, the debt's going to come back and it's going to be fucking awful for me, right? And so I feel that there might be a danger that these people don't realize in validating people for being victims.
Yes.
And I don't think they fully appreciate that. And I'm not saying that some people's lives, just back to the transgender thing, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying that transgendered people's lives aren't more difficult in some way and that some people aren't a lot happier being the different gender, and go for it if that's going to make you happy. But I think it's dangerous when there's a bandwagon that's disrupting their individual journey. And I also think that one causal explanation for everything is wrong. They go, transgender people have a higher suicide rate. It must be because of bigotry. It's like, well, first of all, I'm a pretty depressive kind of guy. I've got like a lot of negative emotions, right? Now, I would hate to think what would happen to me in one of those downward parts when you started injecting me with estrogen. Do you know what I mean? That could tip me over the edge if I went through a second puberty. Yeah. So I'm just saying that there's a lot going on here, and truth should be defended, and we should be able to have these conversations without it being shut down as bigotry or hatred. And I certainly are very close to my one person I'm very close to who's trans or whatever, who I think is a brilliant person. But yeah, I wouldn't want to either way tilt their journey. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's theirs. It's not yours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Jesus Christ. So you've done a lot of reading. You've done a lot of...
Well, when you come out of a cult, man, you're like, the fuck? Because Richard Dawkins, he only wrote all that anti-religious shit because he used to be a religious nut when he was younger. Yeah. So it's sort of but it's a good experience. Although I felt like I've disrupted my character development, and I'm almost 30, living at home like a fucking loser because I threw away all these years that I should have put into setting myself up as a independent adult. I've also gained a lot of wisdom where I've been confronted to know that, one, I don't even know how to think properly. That's not inherent. People think they're thinking, they're not thinking, they're judging.
Yes.
Right? like the courtroom. They haven't developed like a proper courtroom in their own brain. It's like when you go, oh, like how many times do you go, oh, Gary's a shit person, you know, when in actuality you just might be jealous of Gary, but you found a way to go, he's a shit person because that suits your fucking narrative.
Yeah, I do that to people. I was doing it today before.
We all do it.
But at the same time, I'm in my own bias again where I go, because I feel like I can genuinely audit people quite. I know, and I'm happy to admit at times when I'll look at someone and go, they're a shit person. I know in my head I'm going, no, you're clearly jealous of them.
Right.
Like I can really recognize
well, that's a
reality.
skill to develop, and that takes maturity. And then I feel this ideology disrupts that maturing process because it always puts the moral burden outside of the individual between groups rather than like constantly going, I'm a corrupt piece of shit. I'm fucking insane. Do you know what I mean?
I actually get quite a kick, a real joy out of picking those things up in myself, doing something and realizing as I'm doing it why I'm like the real reason as to why I'm doing it. But with the shit person thing, this person actually just is a shit person, so that's okay. But otherwise, there are times where I'm
only going to believe that verdict once I see legal aid defending them. Like we have to have a courtroom for me to go, is Gary shit?
Okay, well Gary, I don't know where he is, mate, but he's imaginary, and I guarantee he's probably a shit cunt with a name like
think
Gary.
Gary's probably shit too.
Yeah,
man, but
fucking Gary.
Everyone deserves a fair trial.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, I guess, fuck me. So do you feel like you had to go, and do you think it's important for other people, maybe not to go through what you've gone through to the same extent, but to totally go down a path of believing and kissing and sucking their own bullshit to an extent that their bullshit fucking explodes and that they end up totally ripped apart and having to pick up the pieces again before they can grow as a better person?
Well, maybe. It's hard to know. It's hard to know because everyone's different.
Yeah.
Some people, you know, are super together who never had to go through my fuckery. You know what I mean? But, you know, maybe for others, it's like when you're a kid, you know, you run around the kitchen, you hit your head on the side of the kitchen table and then you go, oh, even though mum told me not to do that, I had to do it until I realized that it was an error.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, I had to join a cult for 4 years to go, oh, I've hit my head on the fucking table of ideology.
Right. But I think that experience that you've had, and something that I've had maybe to a much lesser extent, but still I can empathize with what you've gone through. You come out of it so much, like how different are you as a person now as opposed to you are back then? Would you say completely?
I'm a lot less naive.
Okay.
I don't trust anyone for what they say. If someone goes, I'm doing this, I don't believe anyone's motivations. I don't believe my own motivations.
Right.
And the thing is, it's like, not only do I kind of remember these lessons, so I feel like in my own head, I go in and out of remembering these stuff because I'll get carried away and lost with my own hatred and resentment and envy and madness and my desire to bring it all down. Right, my inner school shooter.
So but
then it's like I've got dementia. It's like I'll kind of like forget all this stuff I've learned for temporarily, and then I'll have like you know how people with dementia, they have a moment where they come good for a second. And they go, oh, Jimmy, I remember you. You know, and it's like, okay, Granddad, great. He's with us for a minute.
Yeah,
it's like I'll go in and out of just being a resentful lunatic.
Yeah,
dwelling in my own self-pity. And then I'll have a moment where I'll wake up and I'll go, oh, I should write gratitude letters. And this is great. And then I'll go back into dementia again.
So how often are you in dementia? How often
I'll probably say about 95% of the time.
Wow. So you feel like you're a piece of shit all the time?
Mostly.
Why is this?
Because it's easier.
Well, is it easier because that's just what you're wired as, or?
Well, I think it's maybe I'm making a slow process. Like maybe if I work hard for 6 months, I'll get it down to 94%. Do you know what I mean?
But I think you're looking at that in a complete... Because, mate, I'm telling you, I used to feel like a piece of shit 95% of the time as well. And then one day, I just woke up feeling like God.
Well, I think
then that's it.
I think it's a neural pathways take a while to change. Do you know what I mean? You're like, you know how young kids...
Are you trying to change it?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
How so?
I try to meditate frequently. I try to exercise. So meditation's good because it's basically... trying to clear your head and not being ruled by your own impulses. So our brains will run towards oh, what did Gary think of me? What did he mean by that? Or you should check Facebook. So, your first order drives like masturbation, Facebook, all those basic addiction shit. And then second order drives like, oh, my career, my vanity, my social status, right?
Yeah.
And then, you try to suppress all that. And then maybe the third order drives of like, you know what, I love my family. I should say something nice to them, right? But that's hard, and that requires a lot harder moral work because you have to expose your own vulnerability to someone for a moment, and you have to be self-orientated. What I mean is, unlike going, oh, Josh is a racist, right, online or shaming someone, that means you don't have to experience any vulnerability or humility.
Yourself, yeah.
Right. Well, mending that relationship with your estranged brother requires you having to admit that you did something wrong, which means that part of yourself has to die for a moment.
Yeah.
And then who wants to let go of that part of their own ego and pride?
Yeah. Yeah. So is that something that you haven't done then?
I'm making small incremental steps too, but it's fucking hard.
Okay.
And it's a whole lot harder than when I was being an Antifa person organizing rallies or whatever.
Right.
I never had to deal with the horrible pains of confronting my own malevolence.
Okay, so
But it's ultimately more rewarding in the long term because what I think happens is when you choose the easy path, sure, you get pleasure in the moment, but in the long term, you're trading self-esteem for pleasure.
Yes.
Because you don't respect yourself when you do the easy way. And you know it on some level.
Yes.
But when you delay the instant gratification and you do the path that you think is more meaningful and ultimately more fulfilling, you gain self-esteem.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So what is it that makes you, like when you wake up in the morning, what is it that makes you feel like a piece of shit? Seriously, answer this properly.
What makes me feel like a piece of shit?
What have you done so bad to yourself or to the world?
I sometimes feel like I've thrown away my... It's all irrational. But sometimes I feel like I've thrown away my opportunities to become as good of a comedian as I could be by the time I wasted in the cult. I feel bad because of the times I spend procrastinating. I feel bad because I act in the same childhoodish patterns relating to my family as opposed to reasserting those patterns of behavior to become more mature or as mature as they could be.
You're just upset. This is what it is. You're just upset that you're not where you want to be right now. You sound
Partly.
like... Yeah. No, that's it.
Okay.
It seems like every single issue is stemmed back to the fact that you're not where you want to be right now.
Well, I guess I fall short of my own ideal.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you just said then is exactly like porn or fucking that instant gratification thing.
But it's a double-edged sword because on the one hand... Because I feel what has to happen is so the Buddhist idea is kind of like the idea of like all that ideal is an illusion and you should let go of it and that in itself is addictive or whatever. But maybe that's true and maybe that's part of the ideal that is foolish and the wrong ideal to strive towards. Although I think my ideal now is a hell of a lot better than it was when I was in the cult or when I was in my earlier 20s or whatever.
That's
teenager.
bullshit. I reckon that just sounds like that thing just sounds like a bit of a cop-out to me. That just
Which one?
The Buddhist thing. Like
You disagree with the Buddhist point of view, they'll let it all go, or?
Yeah, because like we're here once. That's it. Like what do you want to walk around just,
Well, I feel like it's like this. So there is an ideal. There is a bit of self that we should strive towards too, right?
Yeah.
But I think the problem is you can dwell in self-pitying of not meeting the ideal.
which is what you're doing right now.
Which is what I'm doing
Yep.
some of the time. Or
95% of the time,
I
apparently.
could courageously move towards the ideal and suck it up, right? Which would ultimately bring me more self-esteem. And it's sort of that thing of like, once I left this cult, I was really embittered because I had huge amounts of betrayal in every direction of my life. The way I was treated in this cult and the way I was, my own foolishness and just the madness that was all involved in it all.
You played yourself by accident.
Yeah. And so I had a lot of resentment and bitterness or whatever. And so I used to be a very open, trusting person, but then I came really shut. You go, people are evil. But then I have to go this step further and go, okay, well, people are evil or can be evil, but people can also be good. Now I'm going to be open, but not because I'm a naive idiot, but because I'm able to be courageous enough to give it a try.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's the mode of being, walking towards the ideal, that when I'm not self-pitying, That's the mode of being. But sometimes it's easier to be overwhelmed and crushed by your own ideal.
Right. You almost sound like you're. Do you feel like sometimes that you're too smart for your own good?
I feel like, in terms of being smart, I mean, I'm so dumb in so many ways. You know what I mean?
Everyone is. I can't I can't mop.
Am I too smart in some ways? Well, I feel like the problem is like part of the reason I fell down this stuff is because of an arrogance of maybe just in some ways I am smart, right? And then I became, because what happens when you're smart is you become like that persecutor in your brain I was talking about becomes a really fucking good persecutor because they're smart, and that's almost more dangerous. Yeah, because your brain can be used in more. You can create a better, stronger defense for a false reality with an intellect when it's an unbalanced intellect or whatever. So intellect without wisdom can justify about anything. But obviously because I was dyslexic growing up, I've got insecurities about being dumb, right? So on the one hand, I'm sort of like overcompensating in some ways with those insecurities, and then I was thinking about it like this, like, you know how like so I ended up doing something really dumb by trying to overcompensate by showing how smart I was by joining an ideological cult. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I did the dumbest thing by trying to prove how smart I was to everyone. And it's sort of like, how they catch those right-wing Republican dudes that are really anti-gay sucking dick. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not fucking dumb. Yeah. I'm not fucking dumb. And I sucked the dick of dumbness real hard because I was so trying to prove that I wasn't dumb that I did something completely dumb.
You're a complex person, and I'm very fascinated by your story, but I'm probably more fascinated now by you, because it's almost like you've done an extremely stupid thing and fell for some extremely stupid lie, while at the same time, one, being smart enough to get out of it, and two, like you're a very intellectual person. So it almost feels like the battle is with you. It's your own. You're your own worst enemy.
Yeah, I think that's true for all of us, though, and that's why I think that those traditions like Buddhism, Dreamtime stories, or Christianity, for all of its errors and fictions and garbage, a lot of the reoccurring theme is that inner battle, right? Of
course.
And when there's a good quote, which, this is all Carl Jung's idea, which has been popularized through Jordan Peterson, which if you're interested in these kind of things, you should watch him because he's fuckload smarter than me. And it's one of the sources that I use to understand my experiences. Another source is a great book called You Are Now Less Dumb, which is all about our cognitive biases, which I also recommend to you and your listeners. So Carl Jung's idea was that, so when ancient people kind of created, they kind of projected elements of our own personalities into the gods. Yes. So that Zeus is like an element of ourselves or whatever. Yep. And it's like an archetypical state of being. So I think that modern movies are like that. But what happens is we only want to see one part of ourselves. So we go, oh, well, I'm Batman, I'm the good guy, or I'm Neo in the Matrix or whatever, I'm the good guy. But people don't realize that that's one part of you being played out in drama. You're also the evil guy. You're also Agent Smith. You're also the Joker. There's a part of you, a villainous part of yourself that wants to bring it all down and get revenge on reality and take joy on bringing it all down. Do you know what I mean? And the battle between good and evil is inside of ourselves. And this is why the Marxists were doomed to failure, I believe, in their utopian dream of creating a communist society, because they made the mistake of looking at the external world and go, oh, it's between classes. That's where it is. It's like, okay, you get rid of the baddies or whatever, and what happens? Well, you haven't taken on the lesson that you're fucking evil. Just because you're working class and you're poor doesn't mean you're any less evil. So this is the problem with the whole, in comedy, going, Donald Trump, bleh, evil Trump. It's like, yeah, but maybe the biggest difference between you and Trump isn't that he's evil and you're good. Maybe the biggest difference is between you're both evil and he's more competent than you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the character thing you said before is a very great analogy. Like while you were saying that, I was thinking, geez, what character would I be in that situation? Have you thought about that much? I've got mine.
And what, like in terms of fiction I like, or in those examples?
Just in fiction that you like where would you see yourself? Like, I mean, straight away I just saw, as soon as you said it, I went, fuck, if I'm anyone, I'm Mr. Burns.
Who Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
nice.
so. Because I think the beautiful thing about Mr. Burns is, and I've always made jokes about me being Monty.
Right.
Like, calling myself Monty or something like that. But I think about it now in the context that you used it, and it's almost scary how much it makes sense to me, because I think the beautiful thing about Mr. Burns is he's evil. He knows that he's evil. But there's those moments through most episodes that he shines through as trying his best to do the right thing. But the right thing in his head is so far away from what the right thing is in general.
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
feel like that almost summarizes what most people are.
Yeah.
Which is we are narcissistic. We have no choice but to be narcissistic. And we are almost put on steroids at a young age now in the society that we live to be even more narcissistic. And I don't think narcissism is a bad thing necessarily. It can turn evil, but going out of our way to try and do the good thing, donating, giving $2 to the homeless person and treating it like a wishing well for our own karma.
For our guilt or whatever.
Yeah, and it just seems like that's a
Well, I
thing.
remember seeing these girls giving like some food to a homeless guy, and then they all took selfies. It's like, I know your fucking motivation wasn't because you gave a shit about the homeless guy. Your motivation was to show your friends how virtuous you are.
Yeah.
You're cheating. You're a moral cheat.
Yeah.
You're trying to cheat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
Like, how you know, that's how I see his ideology and all this shit is it's your morality cheating.
But Mr. Burns is a moral cheat and he just owns it.
Yeah.
And I just like it because I just feel like at the end of the day, we're all somewhat moral cheats. It's all about us no matter what we do.
Well, I think we can, we're an organism. We're designed to look after ourselves.
You came on the show to have a conversation with me about this stuff, and then we'll hopefully plug your shows and we'll hopefully sell more tickets. For me, you've got a really interesting story. Hopefully it gets views for me and everyone gets to hear the story. I think that's fine.
Our interests can align.
It's as long as the exchange is known, right? And I think this is with anything, whether it's capital, whatever it is, as long as there's I know the value exchange is inherently similar and we both get something out of it, then I think that's
totally. So
fine.
In terms of the narcissistic element, it's like, it has to be, it's about a wise, because people might not even know who they are or what they really want, and they fall in love with some dream that's been sold to them on the media or whatever that they think will make them happy, so as much as it's like there's narcissism, but there's also a lack of wisdom there, or an over exacerbation on who they think they're trying to be versus who they are or whatever, and I think it's all got to be in balance and in context.
I had a really interesting experience with that. Only even like 6 months ago, I realized that when I fell in love with the idea of being a comedian or being famous or whatever, and that would solve all my issues and my problems. And then I worked so hard and went out of my way, and I had a taste of it. And I was very lucky because I had a taste of it to a much larger extent than most people.
Yep.
And then I did it, and then I went,
Oh, I'm still fucked.
I'm still fucked. The dog still hates me. I'm still single. I've still got all these things that I've never worked out.
Yeah.
So
it's like it's an unbalanced perspective. You think one thing is going to save you. You're so multifaceted, and it's like it's this game of whack-a-mole, and there's all these moles that are jumping up. But like our brain has to discriminate reality, and we have to be goal-orientated. But then we can lose sight of neglect the other aspects of our, like there's this, I talk about this in my show or whatever, but there's this interesting thing about the way our brain works where you have a bunch of people passing a basketball and then you ask people to watch the basketball being passed, right? Mm-hmm. And count how many times it passes hands. And then they have a man in a monkey suit stand in the middle and then walk out. And then 75% of the time people don't see the man in the monkey suit. Because our brains, when we set it to a goal, has to discriminate reality based on that goal. And goal orientation is incredibly important. We have to be able to, your goal was hunt the lion in terms of the comedy career or whatever, and you had to discriminate other things to be able to focus enough energy to orientate yourself to that goal. Well, the problem is like, although you have to be goal orientated, and it's probably a good thing, it can be a good thing for you to do that stuff. There might be the man in the monkey suit of these other issues you don't even see because you're so focused on the counting how many times the basketball moves hands.
It's not that I couldn't see the man in the monkey suit.
Right.
It was in the corner of my eye.
But you're just trying to like.
Well, what was the man in the what did it mean?
Right. You didn't understand the man in the monkey suit. Why is he there? I don't know. That's just
doesn't matter. Who cares? Let's get back to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was my sort of mentality, which was whether that be, smoking a copious amounts of cannabis, like ridiculous, like an amount that would kill someone, and sending myself down a spiral of, paranoia, depression, anxiety, all of that.
Well, that's what my show's all about. Right. It's called Blaze Against the Machine. It's all about, drug addiction.
Are you still? What were you addicted to? Which
drugs? I would abuse cannabis, but there was been a lot of addiction in my family.
Right. To
heroin and gambling.
Right. Okay. So do you feel like addiction is, or an addictive personality is somewhat biological to an extent? Like, can that be passed down, or is that just who we are?
I think so. I think it's both. I think some people, their traits can be stronger. I think it can be who we are. I mean, so the way I kind of think of it is, one, we have an instinct. This book I read, it kind of described it as maybe a learning disability more than other things, because on the one hand, like, if you get a reward for something, your brain goes, oh, that's dopamine. Keep doing it. That's how you get dopamine. And we're hardwired to get dopamine from like food or sex or like social validation, all these things that would make us more orientated successfully. But like maybe in the Stone Age where our brains evolved, there was no bong you could fucking hit. You know what I mean? So in order to get that feeling, I would have to maybe climb a tree to get the honey for the tribe. Do you know what I mean? But unfortunately, it's like with people who are obese. It's like, that guy maybe in the Stone Age was the guy doing all the awesome shit because he was so motivated for the sugar. But now he's just walking up to a vending machine. Right? So that's one aspect about our nature and the way we can get addicted to things. But then there's another aspect, which is that, they find that, say, when you have rats in a rat's cage, the rat who's at the bottom of the social hierarchy, who's maybe bullied by the other rats, is more likely to drink the cocaine water than the alpha rat, right? Because when we're at the bottom of a hierarchy, you go, oh, I feel like a loser, I'm feeling bad. I need something that's going to make me feel good, more so than someone who's already like, life's going great.
It's interesting, though, that you say that, because we did an episode last week on mental health and suicide and that. And from my own personal experiences, the people that I know or know of that have committed suicide have all been the alpha rat.
Oh, really?
From the outside, at least.
Right.
So I think that's an interest. But I think that is a common theme. I mean, suicide amongst, white men is an epidemic. It's at ridiculous levels. So I feel like that's constantly one argument that I feel like, when we're talking about some of the stuff we're talking about before about class and oppression and all these different things, I feel like, why is it though that this one out of all of them seems to be...
Well, Indigenous suicide rates are higher, but
much higher.
White men are the highest highest overall because we represent more. But the reason women will tend to kill themselves more successfully, but men will have... No, sorry, wrong. Women will attempt to kill themselves more and fail, but men will do it more successfully. And my joke is that when people go, the feminists go, oh, but women try to kill themselves more. Well, maybe, but it could be the case that men don't report their failed suicide attempts as much. When people are like, oh, wake up in the hospital, oh, Jono, you had 80 sleeping pills. What's going on, mate? Yeah, missed a few days on work, mate. Yeah, just a few nights sleep that I didn't get. Thought I'd catch up, mate. Thought I'd catch up, So it could be the case that guys do attempt to kill themselves just as much as women, but don't report it. But it could be a factor that men's social role tend to be seen as strong and competent and stoic. While, if we complain, it's almost like a weakness. One of the most successful mental health models... Not that I'm a fucking psychologist. I'm just some dickhead on the dole who tells jokes. But what I've
Beating
heard,
yourself up again.
what if? Well, I just want people to not go.
I know,
Oh, gospel! This is gospel. I'm going to tell them what I heard the dole bludger say. But look it up. But one of the things that's been successful is the idea of men's shelters.
Yeah.
So men don't like to, like the mental health model of psychotherapy is tend to be more orientated towards women.
Yeah.
So women will talk about their problems with their female friends more than guys will. Guys, when they hang out with their friends, like I'm hanging out to do stuff with my male friends. I'm not hanging out to, so tell me about your day. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm more, let's do something, you know? So one of the successful things they had was getting men to have men's sheds where they would like work on tools and stuff.
Yeah.
And then while they're like building self-esteem, making something, then they can slowly ooze out some of the issues they got, because that helps, that sense of achievement helps alleviate this sense of worthlessness.
Yes.
So men don't want to be, to themselves even, they don't want to see themselves as someone who's just going, oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So potentially these suicide hotlines, maybe it's harder for men to ring them up to talk about their problems. Maybe that's not the best intervention for men who are suicidal. It could be the case that instead of the hotlines or whatever, you know, you got to give them something to maybe mitigate this sense of self-worthlessness by giving them something they can do. Do you know what I mean? And then through that, they could maybe feel more comfortable talking about why they, you know, having these thoughts or what's wrong.
Yeah. I guess, it's a push and pull thing. To totally like change the subject, I guess, altogether, because I am interested in this with the nuclear war stuff that you were talking about before.
Yeah, into the nuclear war.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, can't wait. Honestly, there was a point that my inner anarchist inside was when Trump got in. I was like, fucking press the button, cunt. Like, press it. Like, just let's get it done. It's going to happen. Just press it first.
Right,
So,
you're sick of the waiting. You've got like...
yeah. I'm just
you
like,
got blue balls for nuclear war.
yeah, fuck yeah. Blue balls for nuclear. That's my new Instagram username, by the way. Go follow me. What I can't wait to see, because I think this is going to happen. And I secretly hope out that it happens, because now my inner anarchist is just not everything going to shit at all, because I don't want that at all. But I love to see, when I read the news of Kim Jong-un inviting Trump to come to North Korea and him being the first sitting president that's ever had that, and that he will probably go over there and probably do that because it's Donald Trump, and it'll just be, I mean, he will do whatever it takes to make that happen, because it goes against everything that they've tried to put on this guy. What do you think of that? Have you looked into that much? And what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not the most informed, but I've got some thoughts on it.
Yeah, fuck yeah,
So
let's go.
there's an interesting paradox that happens with right-wing politicians. So, for example, Richard Nixon was able to open up the trading for China. So he actually went and met Mao. And this is, you know, during the height of the Cold War. And Nixon, as you may or may not know, was a really staunch anti-communist. His whole thing was like, we got to win this Cold War, the fucking Reds. And so the reason he was able to go there is because no one could say he was appeasing them. Right now, if a more left-wing president went there who was, I'm kind of into social welfare, I don't want to have that hawkish of a foreign policy. Yeah, it's easier for their opponents to go, you fucking weak dog, you're appeasing them. Yeah. Right. So in that sense, that paradoxically, it could be the case of the more hawkish, more staunch, more kind of brutally pragmatic Donald Trump could actually bring, I could be way off, but there's a case to say that maybe he could actually secure international security in a way that maybe Obama couldn't by being more staunch. Yep. And, I think there's a naivety here about, can't we all just get along? There is an argument that an aggressive foreign policy can stave off war. And, it sounds fucked and whatever, but like the threat being real can make other people back down or whatever. So it could be the case that Trump is able to deal with the crisis. It could also be the case that he ends the world and we all just fucking die.
Yeah, yeah. Would you like to see him do it?
Negotiate the peace or end the world?
No. Negotiate the peace.
Would I like to see him do it? Well, yeah. I mean, it would be better than millions of people dying.
Yeah.
You know, at least give us a chance to like colonize Mars and you know, build super digital AI or whatever, so we can get to maybe
Let that destroy us, the AI.
let the AI destroy us. That's
Yeah.
what I'm always telling people.
Yeah, yeah.
Because at least it's not us doing it to ourselves.
No, it's something else. Yeah, I don't know. I just get a thrill out of. I love the entertainment because the way I see politics now used to be so far into it that it was ridiculous.
'Cause it's I think it's just another form of procrastination.
Pardon?
It's like another form of procrastination because you think it's important.
Yeah.
I'm getting informed. I'm knowing what's going on. But like, man, like who cares what I think about North Korea? Like, I'm not going to like be the domino that changes the course of history on that.
Yeah.
Maybe I can change the course of history on all the shit I'm not,
Yeah.
you know.
I see it just like the Donald Trump reality show, or I see it as absolute entertainment at this point. I see Donald Trump as Ronald McDonald of McDonald's, McDonald's being the government, and he's just the most entertaining one out. And I'd love to see Ronald McDonald save the world because it'd just be like a silly superhero movie that you watched when you were 5. Like how the fact that he got in general, like I remember when he announced that he was going to run. I was in America at the time. I remember being on TV and it was like, this is the most insane PR stunt anyone's ever pulled in the history of the world. Like this guy is, and it was great. It was almost like no one really had anything against him because he wasn't a threat. It was just like, oh, this is.
Dude, it is amazing that he won.
But
it's so unlikely. It's so fucking unlikely. And it's such a, like, you know, it was a fuck you vote in the same way like voting out of the EU was a just vote for change. The status quo is wrong.
Yeah.
And so people were like, Trump was the fuck you vote, and he barely got in because Hillary's was so bad or whatever. But I think it's probably better than Hillary getting in. She would have been just the same goofy fucking crap.
I don't know, man. I think she's. I think she's evil. I think both of them are evil. Bill and Hillary.
But Trump admits he's evil.
I know, but I think Trump's evilness. I think if people could comprehend, or I mean, now I'm pushing my own echo chamber bias, but if people could comprehend and just spend a second looking into these career politicians that are Bill and Hillary Clinton, it far outweighs to a point where this is where these people come up with these theories of reptile people and the fact that they just cannot be human at that point to have the thoughts that they do and to be able to kill so many people. And
well, this is the other thing is it's like, this is the problem here is that people are so naive that they think that they're not human. That's the big mistake. You know, because like, you know, the chances of us being, you know, complicit in the Nazi regime is so much more likely than not being.
Yeah.
You know, it's so, you know, if everyone in society is telling me putting Jews in the oven is helping people, you know, like the chances are would be like the brave person helping the Jews is so fucking unlikely. You know what I mean? And so I feel like people are naive about their own capacity for evil when they go, they're lizard people, they're lizards, that they can't be human. It's like, Gary, you would be evil if you're given that chance, right? You can't even like not go through the Macca's driveway and try and fuck, you know, John's girlfriend, right? Do you know what I mean? But like you're just on a lower level because you're not competent.
So is it similar to like these Harvey Weinsteins and that, where it's just like this ridiculous?
Well, you know, I think that the test of real morality is having the power and not being corrupted by it. Do you know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people will confuse not having power and then being like I'll give you a joke from my comedy or whatever, which is that we choose the most virtuous narrative of why we do things because we like to feel good about ourselves, because we like to feel good in the same way that we can become drug addicted or indulge in pleasures, right? Yeah. So for example, I found myself boasting to my friend that I've never paid for sex. I would never do that. Oh, never. But like the actual reason why I've never paid for sex is I've never had the disposable income to be able to afford it. Yeah. And I've ticked that off as like a sign of my self-discipline and morality. And I feel that we do that in a multitude of ways. Do you know what I mean? People go, oh, Katy Perry, she's a sellout. You know, it's like, yeah, but you've got nothing to sell. Yeah, I totally agree with that shit. Like, I mean, I don't know if you're very much aware of the YouTube world or some of the people that are on there that are these mega stars now. I'm friends with Neil.
Okay. Do you know like much about like the mega stars of like Logan Paul?
Like
and,
the American kind of ones?
Yeah, the ones, because these people are literally now it's gone into a different realm now where this is eclipsed celebrity. It really has.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's
Well, the internet will surpass. It's making all the old institutions redundant.
of course.
So
of
the
course.
TV and the movie stuff, yeah.
So there's these people out there. They're called the Paul brothers, both of them, Jake and Logan Paul. They are. I mean, they've probably got. They've got more subscribers than anyone's probably ever had on the fucking website ever.
And they comedy kind of people?
Yeah, and I guess they appeal to not me, but they appeal to such a mass market that TV could never hit it. I mean, one of the guys was on Disney Channel and was a star on Disney Channel, but he'd only become a star on Disney Channel because he was so big on YouTube that Disney buyed into him, and then he got fired from Disney because he did something in a video
or whatever.
Yeah, probably. But the thing is that this guy never needed Disney by that point anyway. Like we're talking about people that are their own media empires now.
Yep.
I don't need to be the kid on the Mickey Mouse Club. I am the fucking Mickey Mouse Club, and I'm selling the merch, and I also own the 4 other people that are a part of my Mickey Mouse Club.
Right.
Like, it's gone fucking mental now. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's a very...
We were talking about power or something?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I guess it's just this... such an interesting shift now where you don't need to be born into a pre-made or brought into a power structure to be a part of it. And it's open for everyone now.
Well, it's open.
Shifts.
It's opened the playing field and it's created massive opportunities. But it's still, it'll still be the case that you'll have the triangle man. Like you'll have the majority of people on YouTube down here, and then you'll have this guy you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's like a new gold rush. It's like some people are going to become fabulously rich from it.
But I feel like the oppression exists far, far, far less when it's the open playing field. Like if you're down here,
I'd agree.
It's not because you're a part of this class or you're this gender or you're, like
it's helped equalize the media landscape, the internet. Yeah.
It's about as simple as saying if you're not good enough or if you're not working hard enough, then you lose, and that's the main variable.
It's made it a better meritocracy than the gatekeepers at Channel 9 or whatever.
There are no gatekeepers. There are definitely gatekeepers, but they're much easier to steal the keys off.
It's definitely alleviated.
You don't even need to steal the keys anymore. You could just jump the fence. Just be so good that you can fucking jump the fence.
Exactly.
Right? It's not a prison anymore. It's interesting. So you've got some shows coming up. Where have you got shows?
I'm doing the Melbourne Comedy Festival.
Great. All of it?
All of it, the whole run.
Good on you.
It's at 9:30. It's what's the venue? I'm bad with these details, but if you go to Shayne Hunter Facebook page, it's got all my stuff there and videos I do where I talk about like this left-right wing shit, just comedy stuff, and then and then I'm doing the Sydney Comedy Festival on the 3rd to the 6th of May.
Where are you playing?
I'm playing at the Enmore Theatre.
Right.
I'm in. I'm down there, and it should be good fun.
Yep. Okay, great. Would you say your show is a bit of a like informative, bit of a TED talk, bit funny, like it's a bit of everything?
A TED talk. It's just me pointing to graphs the whole time. No, it's like just comedy material that I do in the comedy club. So it's funny, and I'm kind of talking about addiction, the war on drugs and psychedelics.
Right.
And some of the themes that I've been talking about in here are there, but in joke format or whatever.
Cool. And I'll end on this one because this is a good one. What do you want to be? What is the motivation to do the full run at the the Melbourne Comedy Festival? And
I would like to be a comedian who can illuminate the elements of our subconscious biases that make people realize that is the more important underlying substructure that you should pay attention to before the external world of politics.
Okay, so it sounds like you don't want to be a comedian; you want to be fucking Gandhi.
Well, I want to be a comedian. I want to do it through comedy because I love comedy. But I feel like you do comedy what you're interested in. Other people are interested in like different shit. This is what I'm interested in, and because I want to understand it better, I feel like I can't understand unless I can tell jokes about it as well.
Yeah.
So if I can make it funny and punchy, then I get to understand it for myself, and so I want to. It's like people who make songs about certain shit or whatever. I make more pretentious comedy.
Yeah, I like it. I'm definitely going to come see your show. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Shayne's tickets will be at shaynehunter.
Yeah, just if you just Facebook Shayne Hunter.
Facebook it, yeah.
Like page. SHAYNE HUNTER.
Yep, it's not Darren.
It's not fucking Darren, mate.
All right, take care. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for
Talk
having
to you
me.
next week.